So there's faults and taints.
Yeah.
And so for me, a fault or a taint is anything that diminishes the quality of a wine. As simple as that. So faults occur pretty much before bottling. So it happens in the winemaking process. And then taints really sort of happen post that. So incorrect storage, faulty seals, something like that.
Today, we're having a masterclass for wine appreciation with Marc Malouf. I'm Jason.
And I'm Trent, and we're here on an unfiltered, unapologetically unprofessional wine journey. We're saying here, Jace.
Our saying is drink more, try more, learn more. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Marc, thank you so much for joining us.
You are welcome. It's so nice to be here with you guys.
We're super excited to understand and appreciate wine. Particularly in today's session, we're going to try and pick out faults in wine. And we're going to get your guidance in regards to that.
Yeah, I thought I'd spoil you with terrible wines. It's going to be fun.
Which is a very unique take on things. And I think we're going to learn a lot. And it makes sense to me because for you and reading and listening to your content and what you write and how you critique your wine, you're an independent wine writer. You've got your Instagram blog, Wine Worth Routing About.
Yep.
You've also got your I Heart Wine online store, which effectively connects local wineries to consumers directly, as well as international wine. So you do a lot of great things out there.
Yeah, I'm trying my best to be some sort of positive influence in the wine industry because there's a lot of chaos in the wine industry, it seems, at the moment. So you guys as well bring something really positive in. So it's a nice little meeting of minds, I think.
Absolutely. And so that's why I think we've got so much to learn from you. Before we dive into looking at faults in wine, we're going to ask you our icebreaker questions. So hand over to Trent.
Okay, first one. Most memorable wine. Is there one?
Yeah, there is one. So there's a producer from Italy, so a Barolo, Giuseppe Mascarello Monprivato Barolo. And the first wine that literally stopped me in my tracks was a 2004 of that. And that was my pinnacle wine.
Yeah.
But then I took a whim on an auction site and bought a 1989, which is one of the great vintages of Barolo. The bottle was perfect. And I cried when I drank that wine.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and when I gathered myself together, I poured a sample over it and then drove it all the way to Eastwood to give it to my som friend because I'm like, you have to try this, my brother. And then he's doing it and we're calling each other. He goes, this is amazing. I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but I love this one.
Oh, wow.
So that was, a really beautiful point. And that was the culmination of complexity and age, but freshness and all the complexity that comes from Barolo just handled so beautifully. And it was just the perfect wine.
Sometimes we talk about perfection. Was that perfection?
That was perfection.
Wow.
Yeah, perfection.
Is there still a wine you're still wanting to try then? Nope, that's it. A person that you would love to have a bottle of wine with, either past or present?
Oh, that's a really great question. You can get very sentimental with this sort of stuff. If I'm going to be completely honest, I think I share bottles of wine with great mates all the time, and I think that's probably the answer, just to be able to continue doing that with friends and with people that appreciate wine.
Wow.
I think, not really one person in particular.
The community in general.
Yeah.
Great people.
I love that.
Sounds good. Next one. What was the last wine you had?
We're looking at them. Yep. So it was a really interesting wine with lots of faults.
Besides these wines, what was the last wine you had?
The last one I had actually was a really, really stunning Chenin Blanc.
Yeah.
From the Anjou in the Loire.
Yeah.
It's from a producer called Pierre Bise, I'm pretty sure. It was amazing. It's been on I Heart Wine for a while now. It's a 2020 vintage. But there's something about Aussies. I think they get scared to try too much wine if they don't understand the label or this and that. So I'm just like, I wonder how this wine's looking because I always check in on what's in the private cellar on I Heart Wine to make sure it's in tip-top condition. And this particular bottle, I'm like, cool, I'll take one of these home. It was stunning.
There you have it.
No, unfortunately, I drank that whole bottle. I'm sorry. But that was the last one I had.
Okay, cool. Yeah. You love your food as well?
Love food.
Any kind of unique food and wine pairings?
Well, I suppose unique to some, not really to me, but Lebanese food. So I was asked to go on a cooking show recently and make it like a dish. And I was in charge of pairing parts of the menu with wines, and that was a really interesting process. Yeah. And it's amazing, like such simple pairings, but something like a Chardonnay goes so well with hummus. And Sauv Blanc, oh my God. Sauv Blanc goes with so much of Lebanese cuisine, but good Sauv Blanc, So like a terre-à-terre Sauv Blanc from the Crayères vineyard, something like that would or Loire, that would be a beautiful pairing to most Lebanese dishes because there's a lot of herbs and a lot of lemon and just the flavors really work well together.
You're talking Lebanese food, so what dish would you say to kind of educate us? Like, is there a certain dish you say?
I reckon most people know Lebanese food for what's in the restaurants that we can go to. So it's just like a banquet style. So to get through a banquet at a Lebanese restaurant, there's 3 wines that I go to. The first is a Sauv Blanc, because that'll go with most of the dishes. A rosé, like a Bandol rosé, or something with a bit of body, a bit of texture and acid in there. And then the last one is like a Grenache. Or Mourvedre, actually. I'd choose Mourvedre over Grenache. So something from Spain, like a Casa Castillo, and that would go so beautifully with the earthiness of the sumac and the cumin and coriander in the meats and stuff like that. So,
cool. Yeah. You mentioned before people kind of get scared around the wines, the labeling and all that.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to kind of people now coming into the wine world?
Yeah, I mean, it's an obvious one. Just try. We all know that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's a lot of customers of I Heart Wine now that it's taken a while to gain their trust.
Yeah.
So they'll sort of buy something, and then you see them 6 months later buy another thing, and they get a little bit more adventurous. And then they reach out and go, "Hey, Mark, I'm looking for XYZ. Can you guide me?" When that happens, it's amazing because you can send anything, and I know the quality of the wines that we stock. And just getting the feedback from them and how much they love them makes me so happy. But to have someone that you trust to help guide you through these regions of the world or wines of the world is kind of essential if you want to start being adventurous, because you can waste a lot of money.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys know. It's like, I want to explore Burgundy, drop 10 grand and you still haven't found what you're looking for.
Yeah.
So let other people do the groundwork and then find someone you trust whose palate you can trust from experience.
Yeah.
And ask for requests and
definitely.
And,
I think you're spot on there. You know, trust someone that can guide you on that journey rather than maybe like Vivino or something like that ratings and go that far.
Well, let's talk about that just quickly. If you go by Vivino, you're letting the blind man lead the blind. It's just like, well, yeah, anyone can write something about that, but you really want to align yourself with someone that's got some sort of education and background.
You get so much more out of it.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, I look at all the critics and reviewers around Australia and even like overseas, there are very few amongst them that have good palates. And you can tell by the way that they critique wines, and then there's inconsistency every time. So you'll see 3 back-to-back reviews of different wines, but their scores and their descriptors don't align with what they just said about the wine before. And it's just like, what's going on? So it's hard to find those with good palates.
Yeah.
And I think the best palates out there are the winemakers, which makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It's not the critics, because most critics are great journalists. They can write really beautifully and get you involved emotionally, but questionable palates.
That's tough. That's the icebreaker questions.
And that's just opened up so many other questions in my mind that I want to ask. Before we get to the faults, we do want to talk about your journey, and a few other questions will probably pop in.
Yeah.
Your wine journey, where did it start? Because I feel like reading and listening about you, it wasn't that too long ago. Where did your wine journey start?
Really, it started in 2018.
Yeah.
So I was never a big drinker. I never went out for piss-ups with the boys, from school. They were in the pub. I hated beer. I like wine, but not really. And then I got fascinated by food and wine pairings at like killer restaurants. And so that's where I was like, well, how does that work? And so that was always in the back of my mind. But I think about it like jazz. Like, this is probably a bit rude for a lot of musicians, but I look at jazz as like, I'll do that when I'm older, when I have time, because it's a part of music that is so complex and so deep that you really need to devote all of yourself, but you kind of isolate yourself from the rest of what's happening in music if you do that. I thought the same thing about wine. In 2016, I was over in Los Angeles working as a musician, and it was kind of the pinnacle of my career, but I'd left my pregnant wife at home. I was on the trajectory to move over there and just be that rock star life. And something said, get home quick. So I cancelled 2 weeks of work with pretty much my idols of you know, my guitaring life, and flew home, got home on a Saturday morning, kissed my wife's belly, and the next day the baby died and we had a stillborn. Oh. And that was in 2016. And so music was one of those things where it was always the life of who I am. And now it was a reason why I fucked up. Like I shouldn't have been away from my wife. Why would it have happened if I stayed there? Did I put stress on my wife? I don't know what it was. And for the first time in my life, music was no longer a healer. So I spent a few years grieving and trying to navigate sort of my emotions through that. And to distract myself, I thought, well, what's something else in life that I want to learn about, but I've never given my chance? And I've always been obsessed with food. Yeah. So that's always been there. But the wine pairing and wine was like, okay, maybe I can deep dive into that. Yeah. And so I started teaching myself about wine. And I'm one of those people that doesn't believe in, I know I contradict what I said before, but I don't believe that everyone out there is a great teacher. So I always teach myself. So I've taught myself music and I've taught myself cooking. And so I'm going to teach myself about wine by buying it, reading. Like there's a wine critic who's become a really close friend called Jeremy Oliver, and his wine annual of 2016 I used to read before I bought any wines and go, what sounds like something that I'd like? And I'd go through every review that he wrote, and then I'd find something like, that sounds so interesting. I'll buy that wine. And so I'd scour the internet, find it, buy it, open it, reading his reviews and sort of try and link my brain with his descriptors and all that stuff. And that's how I learned about wine. Coming out of it, I didn't turn into an alcoholic because I always spit. I don't like the effects of alcohol. But I'd realized that I'd accumulated a lot of wine. And I'd spent a lot of money. And I'm like, how do I turn this into a positive? Because this is pretty negative. Yeah. So I thought, all right, well, why don't I start an Instagram page and write about the wines that I really liked, hopefully steering people to those wineries and they can buy the wines and I'm doing a good deed. Yeah. And that's the only reason why Wine Worth Writing About exists. Yeah. And the only reason why I'm in the wine industry today, because everything kind of came from that. Wow. And and winemakers could see some sort of talent in the way that I was analyzing wines and they'd sort of send wines to see if I could come through with, you know, the same sort of goods. And then that just snowballed. So that's the only reason why I'm in wine. And I'm still a musician today as well.
But there's something in that, you know, there's a lot of people that have an Instagram page and write about wine, but you write it in a very specific, detailed, analytical way that I could never get to. And what I think about is the time frame. Like I think, you know, 2018 is when you were kicking off. That's only 6 years ago, right? Yeah. We're probably 1.5 years into our journey. And I'm like probably 1% of the knowledge and palate and training that you have. So to me, I kind of think, how did you get there? Is it hours of just trying and tasting to enhance your palate? How did that come about that?
Well, remember, I've been obsessed with cooking my whole life. Yeah. So flavors and aromas are so important to me. So that's always been there. And so maybe drawing that connection between, you know, seasoning a dish and understanding the complexity and the layers within a dish itself, that translates pretty clearly for me when it comes to analyzing something like wine or music as well. Yeah. So my job is to analyze music and produce music. And so I can listen to a song and in, you know, a matter of moments go, okay, they use this guitar on this pickup with this pedal, that drum kit's been mic'd this way. And it's just the way my brain works. Yeah. Okay. It really sort of breaks things down. So,
and that's since you were young. That's how you analyze.
It's always been there. Yeah. It's always been there. And my way of learning is deconstruction and then reconstruction. So I understand from the ground up rather than jumping in up the top and go, how do I learn everything? I need to break it down into its simplest components and then go, okay, and then put it back together and go, that's how they got there.
Yeah.
I reckon you would have been an awesome mechanic then as well. Right?
Engineering mind frame.
I am hopeless. I remember doing woodwork at school and a box would come out like triangular. I'm like, what the hell have I done? I'm terrible. I'm not a handyman.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So just to clarify, because I always imagine this with people that have fantastic palates, you're not tasting wine 4 to 5 times a day. It's not a volume transaction thing. It's something innate you've been able to pick up to isolate flavors.
Yeah, and over time, obviously, I've been sent hundreds of wines to review every sort of month, sort of thing. So yes, you do that anyway. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, it's come a bit natural. I read back on my notes from 2018, and I'm like, wow, like that's actually not like it's pretty accurate. I'm surprised at myself, but that means for me that maybe it was always there. Yeah, and I just kind of have honed it in a little bit.
So today's episode is about wine faults.
Yeah.
So what are wine faults?
So, okay, it's interesting. So there's faults and taints.
Yeah.
And so for me, a fault or a taint is anything that diminishes the quality of a wine. As simple as that. So faults occur pretty much before bottling. So it happens in the winemaking process. And then taints really sort of happen post that. So incorrect storage, faulty seals, something like that.
Yeah.
Right? So that's pretty much what they are.
When is a fault and not just part of winemaking style?
Okay. So there's the whole objective, subjective part of wine. I'm of a very firm belief, and I always have been, and I have so many arguments about this, that wine assessment, if we're talking about quality, is objective. It's not subjective. The amount you like a wine is subjective. Okay. So what's the whole purpose of drinking wine? Is it for pleasure, or is it for being analytical and freaking, assessing something? And the answer is 99% of the time it's for pleasure. Yeah. So it doesn't matter if a fault is there, but it's enjoyed by someone. It doesn't matter. But as far as if I'm writing something up, and my whole purpose of writing it is to guide consumers, I have to be as honest as possible, because I want people to read my notes, and this is why I go into so much more detail than many other writers. I want them to read it and go, I've tasted that wine in my mind from reading that note, and that sounds like something that I'd like to try. So if Brettanomyces, so the smell of offal and horse manure is something that someone goes, I love that in my wine. Great, go buy it. Yeah. It's in my notes. But if they don't, they go, ooh, I'll steer clear of that. So that's the whole purpose of identifying these things for me when I'm writing about it. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so what have you brought us today then?
All right. So it's a bit of an exercise just to get our minds going. Yeah. I've brought 6 wines, so 3 whites, questionable whites, and then 3 reds. I tasted these last night. There's a lot of things going on in there, but we'll talk about it. So I'll explain sort of the really sort of broad spectrum of faults, just that everyone should be kind of aware of. The first one is TCA. TCA is cork taint. So that happens before we get it. It's just a cork that's got like a fungal infection, right? And so it makes a wine over time when it reacts with the stuff that's in the bottle. It gives this moldy, like, when you walk into I'm sorry if I offend anyone, but an old person's closet and you smell the clothes and they're like dusty and that's TCA. Yeah. And that mutes and suppresses the freshness, the aromas, like the florals and the fruit in a wine on the nose and the palate, right? And then it's pretty gross. For me, that's a no-no. Like TCA, if a wine's got TCA, like take it back to the store, get a refund or get a replacement, because there's no helping that wine.
So I've got this jumper that we've had in the wash, took it in too early. It still had a bit of moisture in it, and then I kept it in the closet. Yeah. Took it out, and it had this funky kind of smell to it. Is that what you're referring to?
Have you got it right here? Let's smell it.
It's that damn kind of musky.
Let's go.
It's the damn musky smell. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so it's like that moldy. Like, is there mold on these clothes? Like you just smell.
Yes. Okay, that's my
smell of
jumper.
TCA.
Okay.
So, question: you said cork taint. So, non-cork bottles, would they ever have any TCA in it?
No, because it comes from cork.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So there's a great way of eliminating. Get screw cap.
Yeah.
Right. But then there's also DMs and like glass stoppers. There's other different and plastic things. But But I mean, it's becoming way less frequent to get a bottle that's TCA affected. Years ago, like in front, like Portugal, I'm pretty sure in Portugal they used to put chlorine like in the soils to treat the cork forest or something like that. And TCA is because of that. Yeah. Like the trees soak it up and it reacts. So there's history behind why there's cork taint, but nowadays, you know, it's trying to be eradicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it was like there's some silly statistic that 30% of all wines with cork back in the day were TCA affected. Like that's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the first one.
Yes.
The next one is oxidation.
Yeah.
So Premox, you've probably heard of Premox. Premox is just an abbreviated way of saying premature oxidation. So that means that oxygen has either occurred in the winery that's not been controlled enough, because oxygen in winemaking is super important.
Yeah.
So that's why you barrel age things and you pump it through the wines for the fermentation, all that stuff. But sometimes something can happen at bottling where it's just been exposed to too much oxygen, and that will deteriorate and grow in the bottle. But most of oxidation happens because the cork or the seal is not tight and proper. And then the other time, just incorrect storage. So you'll force those things to happen. Oxidation is one of those subjective parts of faults because some people like oxidative wines. There's purposefully oxidative wines. Like if you go to the Jura, there's some Loire, like there's a whole bunch of different wines that are made that use that as a tool to give complexity. Now, those sorts of elements that you'll taste in oxidative wines for whites, they go to like a honeyed spectrum, nuttiness, which is really lovely. But then you get bruised apple and sort of more oxidated fruit. Like it's just oxidized fruit. Like you get those characters like old pineapple and things like that. And the color changes. So it gets darker in color for whites. In reds, it can turn a bit brown and it gets pretty funky. And you can get sort of the soy characters and all that stuff as well. The next fault that we can see in some of these wines.
So just on that part about oxidative wine. So you mentioned the brown color. Do you get with old wines when you leave it too long? Is that called it's overly oxidative? Or?
So my brother, I have put in an old wine here that hasn't gone through like a faulty seal, and we can see that too.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's interesting.
Okay.
Now, when wines see too much oxygen, that can also lead to other faults like volatile acidity and sometimes Brettanomyces. So that's kind of a gateway to those things happening. So volatile acidity, there's a lot of VA in a lot of wines around the world. Even in Australia, like there's biodynamics in the natural wines. There's so much VA, but it's never freaking mentioned in all these tasting notes. And I see certain people taste wines and go on about them like, bro, that's got so much VA. And that comes from fermentation and just not controlling things to the best. Like I'm very sensitive to VA, but when it's subtle, it can give lift to a wine and a bit of energy and excitement, which I think people love in Chardonnay and things like that.
Yeah.
If it's too much, it turns to vinegar, right? So if you, and nail polish remover, it's nail polish remover smell is VA, but it's ethyl acetate. So it's a different type of VA. I associate VA more with the vinegar aromas that come from wine. So Barolo has a lot of VA. It's just like a lifted kind of balsamic-y note.
Oh, okay.
That's VA in red wine, right?
Okay.
In whites, it's probably more like white balsamic, so it's a bit sweeter. And then it goes to things like, the nail polish kind of thing. And then the last fault that I'll talk about, just because it's probably a common one. Oh, and I'll speak about two more, but I don't have the last one in front of us.
Well, sorry, before we get to that, how does the VA come about?
So that's bacterial.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's just a part of fermentation. So all these, sorry, I shouldn't say all these. There are wines that are made, that naturally ferment.
Yeah.
Right? So natural ferments mean they take their time with it.
Yeah.
They'll ferment when they want to. That's when that bacteria can get in there and start growing if it's not looked after and not sulfured and things like that. So there's those sorts of things that come from natural wine, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of winemakers go, whoop, I can see a bit of VA, and they'll, cure it with their little chemicals.
Magic.
And stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but if it's left too much, it's pretty noticeable.
Okay. A lot of these are bacterial-based kind of wine faults like VA, cork taints.
Your cork taint's more that fungal.
Okay. Infection. Okay. And Brett as well, right?
The Brett is a bio thing too, like a microbial thing. And that's the smell of farm.
Yeah.
Like it's not pooey, but it's like
Smells farm.
yeah. I think really great, really great Brett in wines is this subtle offal note. It's almost like liver kind of thing, and you're just like, oh, that's really nice. Or bone marrow.
Yeah.
I love that, but it's got to be very subtle because Brett does shorten the palate. So when you have Brett, it just cuts off the fruit. And so if it's too big, it gets too stinky. It gets too like it mutes
everything.
It's very and so a lot of winemakers will intentionally put it in. There's a wonderful winemaker from Australia who I will not name, and I will not name the wine, has a barrel that has Brett in it, but then he treats it after he's let the juice in there and then adds it to other things to give that complexity. So it can be used for good. But I mean, there's a lot of winemakers in Australia because Australia makes very clean wine that will not touch Brett-affected wines. She's like, nope, done. And there's reasons for there's history of Brett in South Australia that kind of did damage. And it's very hard to eradicate Brett if you have it in the winery. So you basically have to burn everything, like just get rid of everything, right? So that's Brett. There's one of the wines here definitely has Brett. Woohoo! And then the last thing that I don't have, because I don't drink many natural wines that are this bad, but mousiness. So mousiness is when you taste a wine and it goes from like maybe fruity, but then detours quickly and tastes like graham crackers. It's almost like all brand cereal. And you're like, what the hell is this? It's called mousy because it kind of tastes like a mouse cage smells. Does that make sense?
I haven't smelled too many mouse cages.
Yeah, I'm glad that you haven't tried that in the wine, but it's unmistakable. You're just like, oh.
But you say all brand cereal.
All brand cereal.
It smells like that.
Yep. I'm not a fan.
I don't mind all brand. Okay. Maybe I like mouse cage. Okay.
Yeah. So that's another thing. I think that's kind of disappearing, which is nice. Yeah. It's much more rare than it used to be.
The other one I also hear about is cooked wine as well. How do you know when a wine is cooked?
Yeah. So this is where the complex part of faulty wine comes in. And this is why I suggest, I'm so sorry to all the auction houses out there, but I'm just going to say it. You got to be careful where you buy your wines because wines that are left in light, in storage conditions that sees fluctuations of temperature, direct sunlight or heat, it destroys and degrades the wine. So the quality is very compromised. Most of these auction houses have wines that come from God knows where. So it's the chances of you getting a pristine bottle from an auction house are Buckley's, in my opinion. I mean, you could be lucky. I was lucky with that 89 Montprevado, which is, it's still mind-blowing. I'm like, I won the lottery. Like, what the hell? But I always suggest if you're serious about your wine and you don't want to waste your money, even though auction houses can give you really great value purchases every now and then, go somewhere that understands that. At iHeart Wine, there's not one bottle in our private cellar that has seen light. It's all in their boxes in temperature-controlled storage with humidity. Like, it's pristine because it's too valuable not to be. And I want my customers to go, perfect bottle, perfect bottle, perfect bottle. Shit, that one had TCA. I'm calling Mark. Yep, we'll replace it straight away. You know what I mean? So it's very important. So cooked wine, just poor storage. Right?
How do you know when a wine's cooked?
We're going to have a smell of one.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Okay. So how should we do this? You said that there's no structure or framework on how we should do it.
What I would love you guys to do, now that we've chatted about those faults, have a smell through all of them first.
Okay.
And we'll write down like 1, 2, 3. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep. So left to right. And we'll write down next to the numbers what we can smell in there. If there's a fault, if there's no fault, no fault.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Different varietals all over the place.
All over the place. Thank you very much. So we're not trying to discover what the wines are. All we're trying to do is work out if the wines are sound. If there's a fault, what fault is it?
Okay. So the options are VA.
So VA is one of the options.
Brett.
We've got Brett.
Cooked.
We've got
TCA.
What else have we got?
Oxidize, So
oxidation.
Okay.
So what we'll do the first round by just smelling. And then after we've discussed that, we'll have a taste and we'll try and confirm it.
Sounds good.
So the cooked one that's cooked, what are you going to detect there?
Okay. So cooked wine, is going to smell prematurely old, right? So it's going to have stewed characters, dried fruits, those sort of imagine if you got all the fruit that you can smell in a wine, put it in a bowl and chuck it in an oven.
Got it.
Right? So it just goes into that savory.
Yeah.
It's not tertiary, but
Stewed.
Okay.
Got it.
Oh, actually, I'm going to put another one in. We didn't speak about this, but reduction.
Okay.
So reduction, I'll just quickly tell you about what reductive wine is.
Yeah.
Reductive wine is just sulfur issue, right? So it hasn't seen enough carbon dioxide in the ferment, and it gets the whites smell like flint and gun smoke and kind of that smoky bacon thing, a bit farty. And then the reds go into like smoky bacon, farty as well. Yeah, it's like gun
are you doing?
but it's a byproduct of the yeast. It's like the yeast going, and then it's in the wine. So there's only one here that doesn't have a fault.
Yeah.
You know what I think we should do? Instead of we go, which one was probably in the best shape out of all of them?
Yeah. Okay.
And I should know these are all room temperature wines. So when it's at room temperature,
you pick it up easier.
Right? So I helped you guys out.
So we got VA, Brett, Cooked, TCA, Oxy, and Reductive. So there's 6.
Look at the chances of 6 faults and 6 wines. Gee, Marky boy, thought this through.
but then one of them doesn't have a fault. That's what.
Yeah. But one of them made up for the other ones.
Yeah.
Number 6 is weird, man.
It is.
Okay, so I think now to confirm, everyone taste.
Okay. All right. Let's do a tasting.
So what are we looking for? A degradation in quality.
Okay.
So if you taste fruit, if you taste things that are supposed to be in wine and they're uninterrupted, you're fine. Right? So it means that the fault that is there, that you think might be there, is low enough to not affect the wine.
Yeah.
Okay?
Should you be able to pick up the fault purely through the smell? Yeah.
Yeah. But obviously we go in for the kill too.
Yeah.
Because if it doesn't affect the palate, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's not going to kill someone's enjoyment with a bit of food. You know what I mean?
I did have a wine once which smelt a bit moldy. It didn't taste moldy, but it did affect my experience because every time I went in for a drink.
We'll discuss that because there's a reason. One of the wines is exactly that.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that.
Okay.
So I'll give you a little hint that I never mentioned because I don't know why it didn't cross my mind, but really bad Brett smells like Band-Aids. All right, so which one out of the 6 do we think is sound?
I feel like the first one.
Correct.
Oh, thank God.
So that's the control.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right? And the length of that fruit and the purity is stunning.
Yep.
That's a wonderful wine.
Cool.
Great. So we got that. The rest? Delicious.
Are we going to talk about 2?
Yes, let's talk about 2. So 2, what does everyone think on number 2?
I wrote it's either oxidized or TCA.
I said oxidized, but then...
Why did you say TCA? So you got to explain why you said TCA.
Because it had this moldy smell to it is what I had. The reason I wrote oxy first is I wrote brown apple as well, like bruised apple.
Okay, 100%
and that also
oxidized.
came through?
100%.
Awesome.
Doesn't have TCA though.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But it has another fault in it as well. And it comes out really strong in the palate.
I thought I was mixed between stewed, the kind of...
Awesome.
Good, yeah.
It's VA.
Oh.
Yep.
On the palate, so you said nail...
Yes.
You said nail polish.
But what's more indicative of VA? Vinegar.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not acid, it's VA. Like it's a different thing. It's when that has changed, right? So that's number 2 has VA and it's oxidized. So it's prematurely oxidized.
Is it me or is the color a bit cloudy or a bit
it's
hazy?
a natural wine. So this is an Italian wine that's treated naturally, and that's what happens. Like the chances of you getting something like that are pretty high.
Yeah, okay, got it.
That was not cheap. Not one of these bottles is under $100, mind you.
Oh, wow.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. So
imagine paying that amount and then you're experiencing this.
Correct. So that's why you got to be careful who you trust.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these wines people have promoted pretty heavily. And I will not reveal who they are.
I'm dying to.
All right.
So curious.
It's funny because 2, it feels, because when you talk about like vinegar. It's also a type of acid as well, right? But then it feels flat. But then has that sharp.
It lifts. It's that sharp up. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And on the nose,
Okay,
it lifts too.
Mm.
Yeah. It's a very lifted wine. Now, 3, what do we think?
That vinegar really comes out on the nose, which is why I wrote VA on this one.
On this one?
Yeah.
I thought it smelled a bit like kind of like cooked white fruits. I don't know.
Yep. So this is like an orange wine. So it sees skin contact.
Yeah.
So it's a bit more complex than your average white wine. It's seen some oxidative handling in the winemaking process, but I think it's fine. I don't think that's a fault. I think that's just a part of the complexity of the wine. But this one has TCA.
No.
Mold.
So taste it and tell me what happens on the palate. Count the seconds of fruit.
It's dead.
It's dead. Gone. So that's TCA. So remember what you said before? Does that make a bit more sense now?
It does. I think there's absolutely no remnant of fruit in there.
Correct.
It was still a bit on the nose, actually.
Correct. So that's why I said you got to confirm on the palate too.
Yeah.
Because I could smell that on the nose, but I knew that like it's a small amount on the nose because there's a lot going on in that wine.
Yeah.
So there's a lot competing with the aromas there, but on the palate you're like, yep, that's 100%.
Because I'm trying to look for like wet cardboard or something like that, but I couldn't.
Yeah.
Really.
So the moldy thing in that wine, naturally, there's that, like, I describe it as like a moldy lemon. So that's kind of there, but it kind of works for the wine. So that's why it's maybe a little bit disguised, but that's a TCA right there. All right. How lucky are we? So the next one.
Yeah.
So we've tasted this. What do we think after we tasted it?
I guess we also talked through it.
Yeah, because I said this one was reductive. So we know what, like Chardonnay, everyone's had reductive Chardonnay, but you know, what's a reductive red look like?
Yes.
That's what a reductive red looks like.
Yeah.
So the way to understand, like, confirm on the palate, it's very tight. It's very close. It's just like, I'm not revealing anything, but you can see there's a lot there. So this one may open with a day of air. You know what I mean?
I think, reductive, that kind of flinty, kind of gun smoke type of thing really comes through. Yeah.
There, isn't it?
Which is interesting because I actually really enjoy that smell.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't go, oh, that's not enjoyable. But it's not something I'd expect in a red wine typically. Yeah.
So it's almost like that wine, all its components were frozen in time. And like, I can't get out. And so with oxygen and carbon dioxide and all that stuff, it'll just relax. And then that fruit will just soar, hopefully. Sometimes it doesn't.
So you're saying you keep this open, decanted?
Yep, I'm leaving that bottle for you guys to try over the next 24 hours and see if it changes.
Wow.
Yeah.
How long do you say it would normally blow off? Like, how long do you wait for?
Depends how reductive it is. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Right? And they're like poorly made wines. The wine will fall over before the reduction does, right? All right, the next one.
Oh.
Yeah, so the next one I wrote Brett.
So
this was
pretty.
like, I think
It's horrible.
Yeah, the farm smell is what comes
it's
out.
everything. It's like anything you want to know about Brett, right there.
Yeah.
But it doesn't quite smell of offal. So it's like everything but the good parts of freaking Brett. And then the palate is just horrible. I love you guys, but I'm not tasting that.
I'm so curious. I have to go in again and taste it.
What can you taste any fruit?
Just thinking, it's definitely a taste. But thinking what taste it is.
But see, my face is like...
So remember, this is where subjectivity comes in. Some people will taste that and go, that's my jam. And you're like, wow.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
It's like art, right?
Yeah. That's right.
But for me, I mean, I can't say this is a great wine because it's not. This is very flawed. So, I mean, if I don't score wines because I think it's bullshit.
Yeah.
But if I was to score that wine.
Yeah.
No, you
Would it
failed.
be high?
I'm sorry. Repeat grade 1.
Well, at the start you were saying, you know, typically wine 99% of the time is for pleasure. I'm not experiencing pleasure drinking that wine.
Right.
That's the reality of it.
Yeah. Again, natural producer and happens to be Italian as well. Okay, I want to say something. Great wine, truly great wine is made from the first pour. Everything's balanced. Everything's harmonious. The fruit shines. Everything is there in all its glory. That is great wine. Anything that's not that is not a great wine. So just know that.
Yeah.
And so when you're assessing wine for yourself, if that doesn't happen, you go, oh, I'm not dealing with a great wine in this circumstance. I'm dealing with, is it okay? Is it very good? Is it excellent but not quite great? Or is it trash?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have forgotten in the job who's, has to assess wine. They've forgotten that part of it.
Yeah.
So many, I mean, we've seen the awards that come out recently. You're like, wow, that one's on 98 points. Someone's smoking dope.
But let's say for that wine 5, like from that producer, all their wines will also be very similar style as well. That's their style that they're creating. It's not that bottle.
Correct. That's why I'm not revealing who these winemakers are, right?
Yeah. Okay, got it.
Because it's not fair. Some people will love that.
Yeah.
And the winemaker isn't going, I'm making a shit wine this year.
Yeah.
Like it's not.
Yeah.
They're making wines the way that they want to make wines.
6 kind of felt like, and you were saying it, one of them has all of them.
I got a bit of cardboard on this. I don't know.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I got Brett straight away. It's got Brett.
So there's nothing wrong with the last wine except for it's been aged too long.
Oh.
What?
You said that.
This is what you said.
Yeah.
The producer said that.
So isn't that amazing? Because what we have there are a lot of tertiary characters and sort of prune and chocolate, but the fruit is absolutely there on the palate. The fruit doesn't fade. It's missing freshness and vibrancy and life. So
there's an overpowering smell that I'm getting from this.
You're smelling oak.
But I don't know whether it's prunes or dates, but it's...
Correct. It's down that dried fruit spectrum. And it's just lost that, like if it had, lovely red berries to bring some, but it doesn't have it anymore. So is that a fault? No, that's just that's what we see in wines that have been aged too long. And you got to be careful with Australian wines because a lot of it doesn't need to be aged that long.
So sorry, describe if it's aged too long. What are you tasting and
So let's go back to the original thing about what a fault is. It's a degradation of quality. And so for me, that's gone over the hill and now it's starting to decline. So
can't get much of the fruit.
Yeah, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. Yeah. So it reached its peak like years ago. But it's still alive and kicking.
We still got some acid there, right?
Yeah, everything's still there, but is it a great wine? No. It's just we've left it too long.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's another question though. Like you try wine, it's good. How do you know how long you still have to drink that wine?
Great question. And I think this is where I get so peed off when people give drinking windows. The amount of times I speak to wine lovers who go, Mom, this wine's amazing, but don't touch it for 10 years. I'm like, why? Oh, you can't drink it when it's too acidic or it's too this. I'm like, too acidic? So you can't drink it, but you think it's going to be less acidic in 10 years. That's the slowest thing to go down in wine. It's like, I can't wait to have a tertiary wine with no fruit left and really high acid. Yeah. Makes no sense. People don't understand aging. The only people, in my opinion, that can give accurate windows of drinking are winemakers that know their vineyard, that know their wines and have decades of experience. Because they'll know this vintage look like that vintage and this vintage are almost identical. I treated it the same. If anything, I may have improved this element. That aged to about there. Yeah. So I can safely say this will age there, but I'm going to give it a bit more because I know more now, right? So that's what I think about aging. But a well-made wine that has structure, which means acid, tannin profile, fruit power, everything's there, right? That will age far better than a wine that's disjointed because everything is there in the beginning to slowly degrade over time evenly.
Yeah.
Right? So if high acid wine, low fruit, that fruit's going to disappear. It's just going to be left with acid. High fruit but low acid, you're going to get something that's probably like still fruity but tertiary, like powerful fruit with that little bit of acid left. So it's going to depend on what variety it is and all that stuff. But something like a Riesling, like a really well-made Riesling or Sauv Blanc or something will age as if it's made right. Big fruity, high alcohol wines from Australia, so like a big, voluptuous Barossa Shiraz that's soft around the edges, that's not going to age well. That's to please now. But something like, remember we did that we looked at the Standish, the lamella.
Yeah.
It's an animal. Like it's so tight and structured.
Yeah.
It's a really aggressive wine, but that's got the bones to age a long time because that's going to break down slowly. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So balance from the start is what
balance
we're looking
from the
for.
start is what we want to ensure great drinking from the get-go and balanced aging.
Yeah.
But then again, you've got to have the right storage conditions because you can have an immaculately made wine and store it badly and it's gone. So there's a lot of variability in how wine ages.
I guess the key thing I always hear is balance, right, around wines.
Balance is everything.
And it's a balance that kind of make great wines, and therefore those great wines are the ones that can last the time. Okay.
Correct. And so really structured wines that are out of balance will last longer, but they're not going to be pleasurable because the balance isn't there anyway. Right?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
How did you go about choosing these wines? Like, how did you know? Like, you obviously you tasted them before.
No, I just took a punt and just got lucky with all the wines that I opened.
You're joking. You're serious.
I'm serious. Because I don't have much wine in my cellar that this would occur.
Yeah.
Because I'm so picky. Yeah. So I'd choose from producers that I know are just rock solid. Yeah. But these particular wines were the exception to the rule that I had for Curios. I was like, I wonder if, and I Coravin them. I was right. Yeah. So that's the reason. Obviously, number one is from my cellar. That's why it's perfect.
Yeah.
You know, the last one's also from my cellar.
Yeah.
But I know that I left that too long.
Yeah.
Right?
Cool. So we did this through a blind tasting. So I guess your thoughts on blind tasting wines as well. You do a lot of that.
Blind tasting is really important, but I don't think it's important to guess the variety, the region, all that stuff. That's a game that we play. But I think really the sole purpose of blind tasting is to remove as much preconceived bias or thought process to truly assess a wine in front of you. Yeah. If you don't know what it is, you can just look at it and go, great, how's the balance? How's the acid? How's the fruit quality? What's the oak like?
Yeah.
How does it look? Yeah. And so for me, that's really important because when I'm writing notes, I'm not doing it like Sauvignon Blanc has notes of grass and capsicum, and then therefore every Sauv Blanc that I write about has grass and capsicum. It's like, no. It's so different. It depends on where it's grown and the vintage. So just looking at a wine without any idea of where it comes from, what it is, you can assess it for its quality. And then once you reveal it, you go, did it look like Sauv Blanc? And then if I go, oh, that was a bit of an atypical Sauv Blanc from what it probably should look like, then that's when I go in the note, by the way, this was an atypical Sauv Blanc, but, you know, it was very enjoyable. Yeah. Whatever. So I think blind tasting is very good for assessing wine. And it's just a fun thing that people do. Like, I'm so smart. Look, I can guess all this stuff. Yeah. But I'll tell you a story. I was at a tasting recently and we did all these blind whites. So it's quite atrocious, but the retail value of 16 grand opened at this night, which is a lot of money. And I like to sort of go blind with sight, but also blind with my mind. I don't have preconceived because I don't go out looking for trophy wines. I just don't care enough. I'm a musician. I don't care about labels and all that stuff. I just admire really well-made wines. And when I try something that's amazing, I'll go, who's the winemaker? And then that's where I get fascinated. Yeah. But it starts with what's in my glass first. I don't care about story. I don't care about anything like that. It's just what's in my glass. And we're doing this night, and one of the most expensive bottles looked like, it was not good. It was not good. But as soon as it was revealed, everyone started raving about it.
Oh, wow.
Right. So that's where it's just like, damn. If that was never revealed, we could have had a great conversation about this wine and why we didn't think it was very good. And and you know, if everyone put a dollar value down, then it would kind of be a great way to assess that wine in front of us. But no one did that. You know, so it gets tricky with blind tasting in group situations.
Yes,
but I think for us that are trying to learn about wine and where quality is essential to learning, it's good to look at things blind and assess them.
Would you take a $10 or $15 wine and be able to tell through the quality what things are you looking for to go, you know what, this is a bulk purchase?
Yeah, obviously that's very variable too, but essentially what I find in cheaper wines is just a bit of simplicity. Because I think expensive wines doesn't necessarily equate to great quality, right? But there's a lot of process involved to get to that price, right? So the oak barrels are so expensive.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, you know, if you're making a Shiraz and you've invested in top quality oak, you have to put the price up just to make your profit. So that's why they're there. But at the same time, a $15 wine could be really delicious, well balanced, and then you'd go, that's a really lovely wine. Like, I've got nothing negative to say about that. Bit simple, but lovely wine. Yeah. And then you could taste something really expensive and go, that's a lovely wine. Everything's in the right place, but it could do with some complexity. So it's always going to change.
So I got to say, this has got to be the most unique experience that I've ever had. And I think this should always be a masterclass, because I would never have thought about faults unless I specifically tasted and smelt and got the explanation of what those were. What do you think?
Yeah, it's creating those neural connections from what you're saying is a fault to now it's like that memory now in my brain. So next time I see it and I'll smell it or taste it, I go, oh, yeah, I know.
And that's why like that advice is taste, because you can read.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Who knows what it's going to be like when you have it in, like, it's like saying, if I come and punch you in the face, it's going to hurt a lot. And you're like, oh, cool. Yeah. But until I punch you in the face, you go, oh, that's what it felt like.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with tasting.
And let's not do an episode on that. No. But like it's perfect because, you know, if you talk about what does a farm smell like, or the smell from a farm, you can pick that out through it.
Yeah, there's a million smells at a farm, but now you're like, oh, that smell?
Yes.
Gotcha.
I want to ask one question though. Yeah. So you at a restaurant, you order the wines. Yeah. If it's got Cork, Taint or VA, like which ones can you send back then?
You can send anything.
Any of them back.
So, but the thing is, don't be a dick about it. Like if you, I'm so smart, I picked up a fault in that wine. Oh, you go, oh my, I don't like that. I'm not going to enjoy this wine. I don't want to pay for that. So that's when you go, excuse me, I find this element in the wine. Can I please have it replaced? Yeah, I don't think I'll enjoy that wine. And if someone would be like, no worries.
Yeah. Is that tricky though when it's a style of that wine, like it's got Brett or something like that?
Yeah, but it's up to the somm to sort of go, hey, you've chosen something that's like smells like an anus. Are you cool with that? You know what I mean?
Got it.
Yeah, if they don't warn you, it's their fault. It's their bad. They should have done it in the first place.
Got it.
Yeah. Anus isn't typically one of the things that I'm trying to look for. So.
Smells like glass.
Marc, we're so grateful for this class and taking us through this. Thank you so much and sharing these wines with us. Did you have any other messages for the community about appreciating wine, finding faults, anything else that you want to share?
Don't be scared. Don't be scared to explore. I think it's really important. And be your own self.
Yeah.
You don't have to follow the crowd because the crowd's being led by blind people most of the time. So just do your thing. Find what you love and just explore more variations of that.
Yeah.
I think. And then you'll naturally go on your journey anyway. And if you need help, find someone that actually knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Like Marc Malouf?
Well, I like doing things like this. It's my nerdy kick. I love it.
Cool.
No, that's perfect. You've taught us so much. Thanks again. So that's us at The Windup. Let us know below of any faults that you've been able to pick up and how you're able to detect it. As we like to say here, drink more, try more, learn more.